Russia praises the reopening of embassies in Washington and Havana. As CCTV's Julia Lyubova reports, the country is an old ally of Cuba's and salutes the renewed ties.
When US President Barack Obama reversed a long-standing Cuba policy in December last year and agreed with Havana to restore diplomatic relations, Moscow praised this historic event. According to experts, Moscow is interested in seeing a thaw in Cuba's ties with the US.
It's important because the normalization of the relationship between Cuba and US is one of the goals which we will stand for a long time. But at the same time, we can understand that it will influence very seriously on internal situation in Cuba.
Experts say that serious changes in Cuba can be expected in the next 5 years. Not only due to the opening of the Cuban embassy in Washington, but also the general opening of Cuba to the outside world. However, politically, this is unlikely to cause a headache to the Kremlin. Recently, Cuban President Raúl Castro spoke out against sanctions the EU and US have imposed on Russia over the Ukraine conflict.
Normalization of relations between Cuba and the U.S. doesn't pose any threat to Russia. Relations between Russia and Cuba are solid, not only based on common political interests, but also on various economic projects and deep cooperation in education and culture since the 1960s.
From the early 1960s onwards, relations between Moscow and Havana were described as unbreakable. But they were severely strained after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The new Russian government cut off generous oil subsidies to Cuba, which led to an economic crisis there. But this rift has been restored since. Russia has been trying to incline Cuba to restore military and political ties. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, and even President Vladimir Putin have all paid visits to Havana. And while Moscow remains an important partner for Cuba, it hasn't stopped Havana's interests in restoring its diplomatic ties with the US. Julia Lyubova, CCTV, Moscow.